Hi, everybody. So, yeah, I'm in my car and I cannot figure out how to set my camera up properly, so I apologize for all the blank space above me. It is January, which is the apparently National Blood Donor Month, which is why I've chosen this month to be vampires. So, my first review that I'm going to give you is one of my all-time favorite Stephen King novels, probably about top 5, and that would be Salem's Lot. Well, most of you are familiar with it. It was published in 1975, I believe. And it just is Stephen King's second published novel. And, sorry, when my mother passed away, she left me all of her Stephen King books. Some of them were the ones that she bought way back in the 70s as book club editions, and some of them were re-releases, now book club editions, 20 and 30 years on. And the one that she left me was the illustrated edition, which is on the shelf in my apartment, which I don't really want to, disturb everything to try and go after. So I bought the Kindle edition thinking that it wasn't the special edition because it was only $8.99, but it turns out it was. So that was kind of a fun little bonus. So if you're not familiar with the story, one of the most fun things about any Stephen King story is somebody says, "What is it about?" And you tell them, a man with a troubled past goes to a small town with a dark secret. You've probably got a pretty good idea of what the plot's going to be. So yes, in this case, Ben Mears, a writer with a troubled past, goes to a town with a dark secret. In this case, Jerusalem's Lot. So the introduction, King talks about how just after Carrie went to print, his editor asked if he has anything else. Now, I seem to remember the original story being that the two stories that he had available were Jerusalem's Lot and Blaze, which was published a whole lot later. And it was about a man with Down syndrome who kidnaps a baby and then decides if he wants to keep the baby or not, kind of thing. I don't know anyway. I did read that book, but I don't remember it being particularly good. And then, but in this new introduction, he says that the two were Blaze and Jerusalem's Lot and Roadwork. So I don't know if it is one of those Berenstain Bears Mandela effect things that I remember it being Blaze, but whatever. I don't know. We've moved into that weird alternate universe anyway, so hopefully things are back on track now. So, if you're not familiar with the plot, it's about a writer who goes back to his hometown after 20 years. He's grieving the death of his wife in a motorcycle accident, and he happens to arrive at the same time a whole bunch of really weird things start happening around town. And one of the things that kind of struck me as really interesting was that this is a town that's been boarded up. A lot of people have died. Something viral is going through the town. And it seemed really a story of the times, only in this case, I mean, the problem is vampirism, not a plague. I guess I should tell you the plot. So Ben shows up in town, starts going around looking at all the old haunts, I guess. And he's fascinated with this big house on the hill called the Marston House that belonged to a guy named Hubie Marston, who was a retired trucker. And Hubie killed his wife and killed himself one morning. And when the mail piled up, they went in and they found the bodies, and it was just like a bad scene. And because it's a small town, of course, it was always, the town gossip. And so he meets a young woman named Susan, and they start dating. And through the course of the fall, all these awful things start happening. So the milkman's dog gets sacrificed, and then the two young boys go missing, and one of them just never turns up, and the other one comes back to life and starts, running around creating havoc in the town. And so after a while, they start to figure out that, yeah, everybody's starting to turn into vampires, and what are they going to do about it, right? So Ben, Susan, a teacher from the town, the doctor, and a young boy named Mark, they all become these fearless vampire hunters, right? So Stephen King drew it as a sort of parallel to Dracula and decided he wanted to write Dracula set in the modern day. And as a modern reader, there were a couple of things that I noticed. There's a lot of meditation on evil, sort of the nature of evil in the late industrial age. And in the introduction, King talks about how Dracula is set in a place where old gods and, the supernatural don't stand a chance against science and reason. Whereas King's idea is that science and reason and logic have failed us. I mean, the environment's collapsing, technology isn't what we thought it was going to be. And so now we have to turn back to what I would call dark romanticism, the idea of the spirit and God, and that to take the place of where we have failed as puny humans. So that's kind of an interesting twist on the vampire story. And then the idea of the restoral of faith runs through the whole book. And so a couple more things that I noticed. There are little whispers of books that happen in the future. The idea of children disappearing, the concept of one person and the person you don't think being responsible for it. We saw this again in The Dead Zone and in Cujo and in It. But I mean, obviously it's also sort of a King trope where you have, people dying and then trying to figure out who's responsible for it. And the other thing that I noticed was that the one thing that seemed to be dropped when all of the other things weren't, is the Marston house itself is sort of a MacGuffin. You get hints of what's going on with it, and Ben's book and, why it's important, but we never really see the story of the Marston house. And this actually comes up in the end, which I didn't realize until I flipped through it, because I had flipped through the book that I got when my mom passed, but I didn't realize there was so much stuff in it. So the book also includes some illustrations, one for The Road, and Jerusalem's Law, which both appeared later in Night Shift, and a whole bunch of deleted scenes. I'm going to tell you the deleted scenes are kind of boring, and you're not really missing much. It's a good thing that they were gone. The main subplot that is missing is a whole bunch of rats from the dump have been running around town and grossing people out. So there's like a thread that never gets followed up on. And then the payoff is instead of all the knives from over the counter being pounded through a board at the bottom of the stairs of Eva's boarding house, all the rats are there waiting for Jimmy when he goes downstairs to try to find where Barlow is hiding out. And then the other deleted scene is another one of those sort of meditations on evil and the modern day and why people are fascinated by stories of true crime and so on. And this is part of the book that Ben's writing. And Ben's talking to Susan about how he wants to write this really terrible book just about a series of crimes, and then the person that you thought did it didn't do it. And this actually kind of ends up being part of, I believe it's The Dead Zone, where it's the cop that is killing everybody. So, but in this case, it's like the librarian's son or something. Anyway, I know I think I've got the detail wrong there, but I just kind of skimmed that one because I was at the point where it's like, oh my gosh, how much more of this is there? I know that's like awful when you're trying to do a review of a book and you don't even bother reading all of it. You're like, yeah, no, this isn't interesting. So, the last thing that I kind of liked was that he talks about how his mother always encouraged him to read, but she didn't like him reading what she called trash, and she had ideas of what was good and ideas of what were trash and ideas of what were bad trash. And so she considered Dracula trash, but not bad trash, apparently. And he says that by the time he finished Salem's Lot, she'd passed on, but he always pictured her probably reading the last 100 pages of the book with a cigarette between her lips. And I liked that he ended on a tribute to his mom, who passed before he finished the book. And like I said, I inherited the book from my mom, and I inherited my love and fandom of Stephen King from my mom, so I thought that was also a nice little remembrance that he kind of said goodbye to his mom in that way too. So that's where I'm going to leave you. Mothers that instill love of reading in us are always great. So I hope you're reading lots of great books and staying warm. It's very cold in here, so I'm going to go home. I'm going to go inside and get warmed up. And, if you have blood to donate during National Blood Donor Month, do so. You could save a life. Have a great day.